Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar where you can literally ask us anything. My name is Dan Dolph. I'm on the marketing team here at Progress. I'm joined by the product management team here. We have a large number of folks here that are ready to answer your questions. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Sergey.
Hi, everybody. I guess it's that time of the quarter to do a little overview of the release that's just out. We decided to do somewhat more extensive or support somewhat more extensive conversation around the release. So hence the kind of open mic session. Ivan and I will do the best to take as little time as possible with the review, just to give some seed topics for discussions. Most of this material is online in form of release notes, documentation, and whatnot. But just to structure the discussion, I will go through the main functional new pieces of 13.1, or at least those worth mentioning. Ivan will go through the updates that we did for multilingual and multi-site management, and then we will have the Q&A. So without too much of a forward, what's 13.1 in a nutshell? The big things there are the refactoring optimization of our multi-site and multilingual management. We, for a long time, had a bit of a difficulty managing transitions from single sites to multi-site and back, which people continued to do. And to remedy some of the tricky situations there, we invested quite a bit in refactoring of the backend and some of the UI that handles these options. And as a result, we now have what we think is a much more reliable, smooth and usable way to manage site and languages, whether or not you're running multi-site and multilingual, or you're just using it in single site mode. We continue to invest in the new content UI. We had an ambitious goal to actually complete all the modules this year, which is going to slip a little. But as part of that initiative, 13.1 contains the new documents module. That's now in the new UI with the same patterns as you saw with the image library. And we also added a few feature parity fixes for the image module, which was released in 13.0. Out of the external systems in the MarTech environment, we decided to expand our HubSpot integration, and we added support for pop-up forms, and more importantly, personalization. Now we can do personalization with contact properties, something that we've enabled Sitefinity to do from insight data earlier, as well as lead score. So you don't need to import HubSpot data into Insight, for example, to affect this personalization. Then in the backend UI, we released the first batch of keyboard shortcuts. Now we're going to continue that work, but that's kind of a big opening for us to expand our usability as well as accessibility options for Sitefinity backend. Backend was updated to the latest Angular. The previous version was going out of support later this year, so we decided to jump to the very latest. The red asterisk there indicates that there are some incompatibilities that you may see with the extensions written against the prior version. So there's a bit of help that we published in the form of knowledge base and in the release notes, but there may be adjustments that you need to make with your extensions, if you have any, for your customers based on this upgrade. And the last one, Sitefinity CLI, is updated to automatically upgrade versions from 12.x to higher resolving all the dependencies, bindings, and whatnot. It's not a completely turnkey, but now CLI has a lot of the grunt work baked into automation. So that's as part of the effort to simplify the upgrade paths. I think it's a major step forward for us. A little more on multi-language and multi-site deployments. There are two key things. One is the monosite monolingual modes are deprecated. New projects are started in multi-mode, and old projects convert when a site or language is added. And then on the back end of it, we also did optimizations for large-scale installations. Dozens of sites and languages that resulted in improved startup and also improved editing performance because of some of the cleanup that we automatically do in the database that reduces the time for interactive operations. In the new UI, this is kind of a snapshot. The documents module is now using the same patterns as the content and images. We targeted feature parity in 13.1. The enhancements that we planned, including document preview, timeline, and selectors, will be done later on. We also did a few image module updates. Including support for bulk operations and replace image for translation. Switching to Sitefinity Cloud, there were a couple of updates to improve the overall quality of life. The welcome page was redesigned, not only to feature the brand a bit better, but also give more convenient access to relevant information and reports directly from that stage, particularly as you can see to deployment and metrics dashboards. And we also worked out a couple of enterprise features that are still pending our internal pricing approval, so they're not immediately available to customers, but will be available soon. Namely, support for blob storage, storing media, and a failover add-on that will switch over the hosting to a backup region should any sort of a crisis occur in the primary hosted region. With Insights, there was a bit of background work for the upcoming features, but one thing that those working with Sitefinity Insight customers needs to know is we now have visitor management, and that is composed of a function to delete visitors. It's a fairly simple one with a cutoff for the latest interaction, so you can basically trim any of your stale visitors who haven't visited the site for a while. We're planning to extend the options, but for now, it gives the basic capability to trim the visitors, as well as the report for the quota. Those who work with Insight know that online marketing enterprise editions come with 100K visitors quota, and then there are paid editions of Insights with increasing quota limits. So now we have a way for customers to actually keep to the quota in a very transparent way. We are continuing to work on the .NET Core project. It's still early availability. That is, we don't intend it for production, but we are, I think, making decent progress. In this release, we expanded the widget library, though not by a lot, but we added two new ones that I think are pretty important, the image and a CTA. That is basically a button and link widget. Added image and video support for the hero banners and improved performance for the page layout service that works for both MVC pages as well as .NET Core. So that's kind of an important, I think, development for our continued effort to provide a superior headless platform. So I think that's all for 13.1 in a nutshell. Hopefully that was enough to give you kind of a short review, as well as highlight some of the topics that you may want to drill deeper with questions. So now I'm going to hand it over to Ivan for a bit more detail on the multi-site and multilingual changes in 13.1. Ivan is Director of Engineering for the Sitefinity team.
Yeah. So I will try to go briefly over the changes that we did related to the multi-site and multilingual in 13.1. So what was the goal and what we wanted to achieve was that we wanted to have improved architecture and the way that different multi-site and multilingual cases and scenarios are handled. The changes are related to persistence, API, and UI. What we tried is to have as much as less changes in the UI, so not to distract our customers. And also we wanted to put a baseline for some future scalability changes in the product. I will start with the multi-site changes that we did in the 13.1. Here are several things to consider. Now the system runs and behaves only in multi-site architecture. And users using single site license mode, actually we will not see any difference in the overall user experience that they have prior upgrade. Sites that are running in single site license mode now can easily configure different properties, for example, homepage URL, site URL, site name. Prior that, these were configurable through the advanced settings of the product, which are like configurations. And now you can do this from a very user-friendly screen. There is also ability to configure the modules per site from the same user management screen, which prior 13.1 was also again available through these advanced settings. Another thing is that this change comes with unified design of single site and multi-site modes, which we wanted to ensure optimal experience when switching between the modes. For example, you start a website with single site, then you are adding several more websites, and we wanted not to have a big difference between these scenarios. Also, from the architecture perspective and from the extensibility, before 13.1, we need to support two parallel modes, single site and multi-site mode, which was quite overhead. So now it's only multi-site mode, and even for some extensibility scenarios, you can leverage from this architecture. Apart from these changes that are purely architectural, we addressed a large backlog of bugs and fixed a lot of them. So we tried to clean up everything that was reported from different resources to the multi-site. And important thing is that the multi-site module cannot be deactivated or uninstalled from the modules and services screen. Now this module is like always installed. It's like a system module. And most of the changes that we tried were in the underlying architecture. So we have very small changes in the public API, and we don't expect any breaking changes. I have a screen here. Just try to want to show you what was the changes in the old and the new UX. On the left side, on the screen, you can see system with one site, and that is that has license with one site. So now you can see on the right side we introduce this default menu, and under it you see you have manage site and settings. On the second part of the slide, you can see the same screens, but there when you have a site and license for multiple websites, and if you compare the right side of the slide and both the screens, here you can see that under the default menu you have just the same things. The difference is only one, it's managed site in singular, and the second is managed sites in plural. And before that you can see that there was a bit difference in this screen, so we tried to have unified design. Another thing is that when you have a system with multiple sites and licenses for them, you can see how the screens now look, and they're very similar. So we don't expect this to bring any challenges with the UX. Another thing that I wanted to share, it's probably not something that is quite important for the end user, but maybe if someone has relied on any kind of extensibility point that tries to query the backend of the product in any way, you can see with the red arrow we changed the endpoint of the multi-site management. In addition, in the URL there is after Sitefinity there is a multi-site included in the URL, so we put the service in a different location. Another thing is share with button is now visible only when you have more than one website. This button actually before 13.1 was presented even if you have one website. So now it's this was fixed, and it's the button is only available when you have multiple websites. It's available under templates, under widgets, and everything where you can share data between and different things between the site. Just go briefly of some API changes. Is multi-site mode, the check is marked obsolete, and now if you have some custom logic, it's just needed to be written with the context, and all operations should go checking through the multi-site context. So if you have some custom logic, just check our documentation and consider some updates. The member is marked obsolete, so it won't introduce anything, but it's good to keep to the latest things. The multilingual changes, the things here are a bit more complex, and I will try to explain them. Again, we are talking about low-level architecture and refactoring, which is aiming to improve the performance and when using multiple languages. Changes were behind the scenes, and we don't expect users to see again big UI differences. So one of the main things that we tried to accomplish is to handle the problematic cases and fix some bugs from which the system was hardly recoverable. For example, some scenarios where we one way or another allowed to manipulate the system, and then it was in a not good state. So we try to handle these cases and also simplify some APIs and extensibility points to be more clear when you work with the API. So there are several UI changes, for example, for systems when there is website when there is when you want to add language. This is now done in the basic settings, and by default we have enabled the option to automatically add the language to the website. I will show another slide later. This is also configurable. Before version 13.1, you have to do this manually. First add the language and then go side by side. But there are some particular scenarios that you might have multiple websites that you want to automatically add these languages to them. Also, the important thing is ability to set up shared providers that have different default languages. For example, you have two websites with news, and they can share the providers, but in one of the websites the default language is let's say English, but on another is German. Also, we have provided ability to set the site default languages in the site settings screen, and this is the correct place where you should do the configurations. I have a screenshot and a separate slide for this, and there are several API behavior changes. The things that we try to solve and the challenges. So this is what I mentioned in the previous slide, cannot have sites with shared providers with different default languages. One also scenario that was quite often reported through some support cases, or we observe it when working with different clients and partners, was the case that when you add, for example, have a site, you add a second language, then remove it, then add it back. This caused data corruption in some cases. Usually, adding a language to the website is something that probably you do based on some needs or when you start the project, but there were also some cases when some people start the project, play with it, and then just leave it in the marketing team to manipulate the content. Also, we removed the meaning of the default language in the basic settings because it's now configurable on the site level, and on the basic settings screen you just add the system languages. Another thing that we wanted to solve is filtering some content through APIs. It's related to the extensibility point of the product, and there were several cases that we observed when you try to have a custom logic when you try to filter by a language. It was quite hard to do it properly, so we refactor a bit this API. Important thing to mention is about the backend culture and the backend pages. There are no changes to the translation of this. The current refactor is aimed to the content created by editors, by marketing team, and it doesn't concern the backend pages. Actually, the backend pages have a different way of localization and translation. They are not the same as the front end. They use the standard ASP.NET mechanism and resources for this, so there is no change related to this. Some important things that you might watch for when working with your clients, and if you manage a projects that are multilingual or multi-site. The thing is that if there's, for example, projects which have that were monolingual, later switched to multilingual, but for example, the language of the website actually was, let's say, English, but the content in the website was written in Spanish. These are the things that you need to check because by default, for example, the website starts with English culture, and then the editors, for example, write some other languages, and they doesn't respect the website languages. Another thing is if you have some custom code that you're concerned about, something that you spent a lot of time to write, something that is very important, you rely on it. I suggest to check the our documentation, the code samples that we have, and or contact the support team if you need more details. So the team is really customer driven, and we will do our best to help you. And yeah, to pay attention to the stuff that I mentioned, we changed about the filtering languages and content using the native API. Here's some recommendation before you start some of the new projects. Let's say after upgrade with 13.1. We recommend that before start entering content to a website, choose your site language from the site property screen. This is the screen that I was talking about. Hope the screenshot is not very good, but at least we will give idea where to look for. By default, the site uses English. This is the default culture that when you create a project, it exists there, and it's the language defined under the system languages. From this screen, we recommend to manipulate all the things related to the languages of the website, and you can control this inheritance of the system languages based on your needs. For example, if you have 5 websites and you don't have, you want to add languages to them, but not making changes to each of these websites because they're supporting this culture. You can do it from the basic settings screen, and here there is option to control languages that will be inherited. Also, important thing is that you add languages on your dev or some staging environment, and then move the changes through CI/CD process, because usually in production we recommend not to make any changes to the configuration, and they should be in read-only mode. Just want to give you some highlights about the API behavior change. So one of the important thing here is to use the culture region. I have 2 samples here at the bottom of the slide with let's say the fluent and the native API. I hope you can see them. If you use a culture region in all the cases above listed, you should be safe. So another thing is that using the current culture or current UI culture doesn't change the current language, and also there's some special API for properties that you want to filter that persist language data, and also using the current context culture, it's recommended to read-write context language when working with Sitefinity content that's localized. But again, I would recommend using the culture region. If you have some API, it's good to consider these changes and refer to the culture region. The culture region, by the way, is not something that it's newly introduced. It's available also in the previous releases. So, and my last slide is just want to give you something like definitions. Now we have like site default culture, which is configured via site settings friendly UI, and we have the system default culture we use only for persistence. It's configured only through advanced settings of the UI, and by default the system comes with English. This can be changed later in the resource config or into the configuration, but it requires to be done in some special cases. So we recommend just manipulating the data through the UI and to the site settings screen. That's for me. So I will switch to Sergey.
It's now the question time. I'll start with kind of a bigger question. So Josh asks, is the goal with .NET Core projects to eventually become the primary platform? Yes, it is. We started that a year ago. There are a lot of changes that are factored into this project, including our transition to a multi-tenant architecture as well. But the main thrust of this is to introduce a 3-tier architecture into Sitefinity and decouple the presentation layer from the main body of Sitefinity so that it can be compiled separately. Now with .NET Core, it can be run on platforms other than Windows, and sort of that affords a different level of scalability to the overall solution. We do have folks who have been up to their ears deep in the .NET Core project on the call. So if there are more questions, we'll be happy to engage in that sort of discussion. Alternatively, we do have communication with partners sort of via conference calls, etc., as part of our early software availability program. So if you are interested in that sort of a conversation, please reach out to us via the forums or best yet, the customer validation program on our community. Apply for membership there, we'll approve you, and then there are threads there on various topics, including .NET Core. So that's that. Josh, is there anything else you'd like to us to expound on related to .NET Core, or was that the right level of coverage?
Nope, that was perfect. I was just curious where that's going, so thank you.
Great. All right, Caroline asks, there are plans to upgrade the forums content widget to MVC. As they're having to build hybrid templates to support MVC and non-MVC widgets just for pages that need forums. Well, sorry to sort of possibly disappoint, but we looked at the forums widget and so far our decision has been no, we're not going to provide that in MVC directly out of the Sitefinity group. Part of that reasoning is that forums is a fairly complex functionality, and there are even companies who manage that functionality as a primary product. We have been trying to solicit partners to develop that on some sort of basis, and then we could promote that through our marketplace. So far, we haven't succeeded, but I know that there are some forum implementations out there in MVC with some capability. So we're happy to continue that discussion. So far, we haven't moved on migrating that over to MVC. One question that I think we should cover, because it came up in different contexts and different conversations, is CLI upgrades. We've used it to upgrade customers automatically with Sitefinity Cloud, so we know it works pretty well in that environment. So now it's generally available for everybody to use, for partners and customers. We so far applied it to upgrades from version 12. Common question is, can we support earlier versions, upgrades from earlier versions, and to what extent? So I'd like, for the benefit of everybody, to have Peter, and maybe he would call out anybody else from the dev group, to expound on that, how it may work now or in the future for upgrading versions earlier than 12. And if there are any specifics about version upgrading from versions 12 as well.
Okay, I'll take.
Peter, go ahead. Yep.
I'll take this question. So at the end, we are actually trying to convert the projects to use NuGet and actually to fix and update the binding redirects and also change the .NET framework. What we are trying to put is actually to work with version 12 and above, because those are the most stable versions and the most recent versions of Sitefinity. We are exploring actually options to go from version 10 and above, and actually also exploring options to upgrade to security patches. Let's say there is a fix and you want to explore to upgrade to 10.x some security patches. We're also exploring this option rather than forcing you to go to the version 12 and above. So everything now we are baking this for the next release cycle. As you know, the CLI, it's not coupled tightly with the Sitefinity release cycle. So once we have something and we have some bug fixes ready, we are actually going to publish a new version of the CLI. So it's going to be available, and it will be also integrated in the same fashion how we integrated it into the Sitefinity Cloud. So in case you want to have continuous integration process and pipeline, you can actually use the CLI. So that's it. If there are more detailed questions, I can take a look at them offline, or maybe we can discuss now.
So there aren't any more questions in the panel regarding CLI, and in fact, there have been only 2 so far. So given we have pretty broad representation, would like to give it another shout for any more questions regarding 13.1. Well, I guess it's all straightforward. I guess we'll wrap up the webinar. The recording will be available to everybody to go through, as well as the presentation decks. And for any further discussions, we do encourage you to join our customer validation program. It's a closed forum. And it being a closed forum, we're a bit freer to discuss any plans for Sitefinity. We do run some proofs there. We solicit people to participate in review sessions for future capabilities. So we would definitely value your participation there. And it's pretty easy to join if you're a member of the community. You would search under groups, and if not, there's a page on our progress website. Just search for Sitefinity CVP, and you will get to the right page to join. All right, with that, thank you very much for giving us the time on the air. Hopefully it was useful, and we'll talk to you in about 3 months when 13.2 is out.